10 ways to make sure that your spouse will never want to cooperate with you. Number 1, be dismissive. Frequently undermine your spouse's ideas or opinions, showing that you don't value your spouse's input. Number 2, avoid communication. Keep important conversations to a minimum, making your spouse feel uninformed or disconnected. Number 3, be sure to criticize often. Focus on your spouse's faults, making constructive criticism sound like personal attacks. Number 4, be sure to refuse to compromise. Insist on having things your way without considering your spouse's needs or feelings. Right. Number 5, show indifference. Act uninterested in your spouse's activities or emotions, making him or her feel unimportant. Number 6, be sure to withhold affection. Stop showing physical or emotional affection, which can lead to feelings of resentment. Number 7, be unreliable. Don't follow through on promises, causing your spouse to lose trust in you. Number 8, be sure to create tension. Bring up past grievances during discussions, which will escalate conflicts instead of fostering resolution. Right. Number 9, be sure to use ultimatums. Give your spouse harsh choices that leave him or her feeling cornered rather than working together towards a solution. And 10, be sure to neglect shared goals. Stop discussing and planning for joint interests, making your spouse feel isolated in the relationship. Now, these behaviors are guaranteed to lead to a breakdown in cooperation and trust. Good luck. I know you can do it. Hey guys, this is Mark, and I got a message to the neurodiverse couple, especially the neurotypical wife. I want to talk about ASD adults and love. Now, some people on the autism spectrum will choose to stay single, others will marry, some will have kids, some will have happy marriages and families, and some will not. An important factor in determining their chances of happiness is awareness. Awareness that there are 2 different languages of 2 different worlds being spoken in the same home. Anger, resentment, depression, grief, rejection, confusion, all are experienced by both partners unless they come to the realization that each is speaking a different language and they learn how to translate for each other. Empathy and emotional intimacy are often lacking in a relationship with an ASD partner. Now, this doesn't mean that love is lacking, though. People on the spectrum love just like anyone else, but they have a hard time understanding the need for expressing love, and they don't know when and how expressions of love should occur unless the NT partner is willing to teach them. Teaching the ins and outs of intimacy can be very helpful to the spouse with ASD, but the instruction needs to be concise and concrete. No hinting or hoping he will just pick up on it. He's never going to be as intuitive as you, the NT wife. People on the spectrum don't pick up on innuendos any more than colorblind people can see when a stoplight turns red. Both partners may be in for far more than they had bargained for, and certainly have had no real assistance from experts until fairly recently, as research has come to light. Now, a diagnosis of ASD may seem like bad news initially, but for the person on the spectrum who has spent his life bumping up against misunderstandings, anger, and rejection for reasons he couldn't begin to understand, such a diagnosis can bring a sense of liberation. And for the neurotypical partner, there is finally a sense of comfort and the knowing that she is sane after all. There was something different at play all through their relationship, and it had nothing to do with lack of love, selfishness, insensitivity, or narcissism. Rather, it had to do with a neurological disorder, a very real disconnect right in the middle of the relationship. But now, thanks to research and media attention, partners affected by ASD have a chance to bring new methods of communication and understanding to the relationship. Yesterday was rough. Your ASD husband had a meltdown or a severe shutdown, and today the house feels quiet, tense, and fragile. And you, the NT wife, are wondering, should I say something? Should I wait? I wonder if he's mad at me. Will this all happen again? So if you've ever felt lost in the day after, this video is for you. I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step repair process, one that reduces pressure, prevents re-triggering, and opens a path back to connection gently, respectfully, and predictably. I'm Mark Hutton, and I work with neurodiverse couples online who are trying to bridge the communication gap, especially during high-intensity moments. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to re-engage your ASD husband after a meltdown or shutdown. You're going to learn why a no-contact period is essential for nervous system recovery, how to communicate safety during the first 24 hours, and what specific language helps your ASD husband return to connection without feeling pressured. First, let's normalize what's happening. A meltdown or shutdown is not a choice. It's not manipulation. It's not he doesn't love you, doesn't care about you, and so on. It's a neurological overwhelm response. The day after, your ASD husband has not recovered. In fact, many adults on the autism spectrum describe this period as feeling hungover, emotionally disorganized, ashamed of losing control, terrified of doing it again, and hypersensitive to any sign of conflict. If you try to talk too soon, your ASD husband may experience it as pressure, criticism, or a demand that he can't meet. So the question becomes, how do you reconnect with someone whose nervous system is still recovering? How do you show that you care without triggering defensiveness or retreat? We begin with the most counterintuitive step for the first 4 to 24 hours, depending on intensity. Most ASD adults need a no contact recovery window. This doesn't mean silence with resentment. It means silence with purpose. During this time, the ASD brain is recalibrating. His sensory and emotional thresholds are still elevated. And any attempt at emotional discussion, even a soft one, is going to feel like too much. Here's what a no contact period communicates. You're safe. I'm not pushing you. You can take your time. And here's what it is not saying. It's not abandonment. It's not punishment. It's not rejection. So if you're the NT spouse, your job during this period is simply to create perceived safety, not conversation. Now, when the time comes to break the no contact window, do not start with spoken conversation. Verbal communication has pace, tone, facial expressions, and emotional intensity that can overwhelm a recovering ASD nervous system. Instead, use written communication, text, note, or a message. Why written first? Your ASD spouse can process the message at his pace. There's no facial cues to decode. He doesn't feel pressure to respond immediately. He can regulate privately. So here's a script that works extremely well. Write it down. Hey, just checking in. I hope you're getting the time you need. I'm here and there's no pressure to talk. When you feel ready, even just a quick thumbs up is totally fine. That signals safety, emotional neutrality, and zero demands. Now, when your ASD partner finally responds, maybe it's a thumbs up, maybe it's a short message, you still avoid emotional content. You shift into what I call low demand, low emotion reentry language. Here's some examples. Thanks for checking in. I'm glad you're getting some rest. No rush on talking. We can reconnect whenever you're ready. Everything's okay on my end. We can just do a calm evening. No conversation needed. Do you see the pattern? It's simple, predictable, low pressure. What you're doing is showing conversation is available but not demanded. This is the opposite of emotional flooding, which ASD partners often fear after a meltdown. Now, once your partner feels stable enough to return to reconnection, your goal is gentle relational reentry, not problem solving. So what does soft reentry look like? Sharing the same room quietly, watching a show together, preparing food side by side, a short walk, silent companionship. You notice what's missing in there? Talking about what happened. That conversation comes later when his executive functioning is online and his shame response has stabilized. For now, the goal is simply return to co-regulation without emotional intensity. Eventually, sometimes a few hours later, sometimes a day later, the window opens for a clearer conversation. You'll know your ASD spouse is ready if you see more eye contact, small attempts at humor, relaxed shoulders, a proactive engagement. And when this window appears, use a structured neutral opener. Here's your script. Is now a good time to review what happened yesterday? If not, we can schedule a time that works better for you. Once again, that script is predictable, non-accusatory, and choice-based. During the discussion, focus on regulation and prevention, not blame. Keep sentences concrete and present-focused. For example, next time, let's make sure we both take a cooling off period. Or it helps me when I know what kind of space you need. Or let's create a plan for the next overload. So in summary, the day after a meltdown is a repair opportunity, not damage control. When you follow this process, in other words, no contact recovery, written first communication, low emotion language, gentle reentry, structured conversation, you create an environment where your ASD husband feels safe enough to reconnect and confident enough to stay connected. She wants you to listen to her. She would want you to
perhaps paraphrase back what she said so she would know that A, you listened to her, and B, you actually understand what she said. Because if she were here, she would say, well, a lot of times when I talk to him, I think he's listening to me, but I know after the fact he didn't hear a damn word I said. So you would want to listen to her. And when I say listen to her, I mean stop what you're doing. Put your phone down, or pull your computer over to the side, or put the TV on mute, whatever you got to do. Stop, unless you're saving a baby from drowning in the backyard pool. Stop what you're doing when she's talking to you about something that might be important, and at least pause for a few seconds and look in her direction so that you can give her the indication that you're actually paying attention and that you're present. Those are two key terms, guys. She wants to know that you're paying attention. She wants to know that you're present. And then when she expresses a feeling, even though you may not understand what she means when she's expressing her feeling, at least you can say, okay, well, I understand that you're upset about that, or I understand that you're disturbed about this. So you're not only listening and paraphrasing back what she said so that you give her the indication that you understand, you're also kind of validating her feelings and her whatever else that she's trying to convey. You're validating that. But it's listening, paraphrasing back so that she'll know that you not only listen, but you understand, and that you're validating her situation, her feelings, her thoughts, whatever that is. So that's the three prongs there. Listen, prove to her you understand, and validate her feelings. I would ask for you guys to ask your wife if she would do you a favor. And you should do this today. Here's the script you can use. You're talking to your NT wife. I want to start listening to you and paying attention to what you have to say because you're important to me. And so could you do me a favor? And could we adopt this scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is something that you're telling me is kind of important, but it's not emergent, and it's maybe doesn't even require my response, but it's still something you want me to listen to. And 5 is what you're telling me is super important, and I need to really pay attention and give you my 100% full attention because it's like a super important thing. And most women will be willing to do that. Most women will be perfectly happy to say, okay, well, I'll do that. And then, so later this evening, she says, well, I wanted to mention something to you, and this is a level 2. Okay, and now you know that it's something that's important to her, but it's not like a big, crucial, emergent thing. Have the conversation with your NT wife sometime today and say, I want to do a new thing. I want to start paying attention to your wants and your needs and your feelings and your thoughts. And it would be helpful to me if you would give me a scale from 1 to 5. 1 is it's important, but it's not something that you necessarily need me to take action on. You just want me to listen to it. 5, it's super important, and I really need to listen, and it's probably something you need me to take action on, and 3 is somewhere in the middle. So when you're going to tell me something that's relatively important, just give it a rating from 1 to 5 so I'll know how important it is, because I want to start paying attention. If she goes, well, I feel this way about that, and she expects you to take how she feels and apply it to some action that you're supposed to implement, that's going to be difficult. So one of the things you can say would be helpful to me if you would just come right out and tell me what you need, instead of putting me in a situation where I have to guess how you feel, or guess what I'm supposed to do based on how you feel, or read your mind about what you need. Just point blank, come right out and tell me what you need. You said that sometimes she feels like it's just a lot of work to explain. As a general rule of thumb, you could say with the business of over-explaining and she gets tired of doing that, then here's your line again. It would be helpful to me if instead of giving me a lengthy explanation, if you could just give me like the summary or the main point. So you're not accusing her of doing anything wrong when you say it would be helpful to me, and you're asking her 2 things. 1, just tell me what you need so I don't have to read my wife's emotions and figure it out. And also it would be helpful to me if you could summarize the main point or main points, and that would save you from a lengthy explanation, because I'm sure that a 10-minute conversation, this is hard for them to do because the female NT brain doesn't think like this. But it would be possible to take a 10-minute monologue and whittle it down to a 10-second main point. She's not going to like doing that because she thinks she's got a data dump on you. That's how they think. The more data, the better. because that's how they think. When they're trying to figure stuff out and they're listening to somebody else, they want as much data as you can pour it on, because that helps them with their processing and decision making and understanding of stuff. It doesn't work like that for the ASD man. Data dumping ends up in meltdowns and shutdowns, or just in false agreement. Yeah, honey, I hear what you're saying. Sure, yeah. I'll do it. Right. But then we get into trouble because you just agreed to get the conversation over with, and then you missed the good message, or you missed something that you were supposed to do. And so now we got to go face that issue at some point.
Today I want to talk to those individuals on the autism spectrum about how you may be able to improve your emotional intelligence. If you're an adult with high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome, and you're in a relationship with a neurotypical partner or spouse, it's very likely that he or she has complained that you're not very empathic, that you're out of touch with your feelings, and that you certainly are out of touch with how other people may feel. I think it's fair to say that most people, if not all people on the autism spectrum, lack emotional intelligence to one degree or another. Emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, assess, and control the emotions of oneself, of others, and of groups. It's the ability to harness emotions to facilitate various cognitive activities, for example, thinking and problem solving. It's also the ability to detect and decipher emotions in faces, pictures, voices, cultural artifacts, including the ability to identify one's own emotions. It's the ability to comprehend emotional language and to appreciate complicated relationships among different emotions. Now, emotional intelligence consists of only 4 attributes. Social awareness. This is understanding the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people, picking up on emotional cues, feeling comfortable socially, and recognizing the power dynamics in a group. Then there is self-management. This is being able to control impulsive feelings and behaviors, managing emotions in healthy ways, taking initiative, following through on commitments, and adapting to changing circumstances. Self-awareness. This is recognizing one's emotions and how they affect one's thoughts and behavior, knowing one's strengths and weaknesses, and having self-confidence. And lastly, there is relationship management, which is knowing how to develop and maintain good relationships, communicate clearly, inspire and influence others, and work well in a team and manage conflict. Affective education is basically learning why you have emotions, their use and misuse, and the identification of different levels of expression. Some of the skills obtained through this form of education include, but are not limited to, the ability to use humor and play to deal with challenges, to resolve conflicts positively and with confidence, to recognize and manage your emotions, and to quickly reduce stress and connect with others through nonverbal communication. This is best done under the supervision of a professional who has expertise in autism spectrum disorders, or a relationship coach. But even without a coach or a therapist, it's still possible for you to do some things on your own in the affective education department. Another important component to affective education includes learning to identify the relevant cues that indicate a particular level of emotion in facial expression, in tone of voice, in body language, and context. The face is described as the information center for emotions. So a typical error that you may have experienced in this area is not identifying which cues are relevant or redundant, or maybe even misinterpreting cues. Affective education can also include activities to detect specific degrees of emotion in others and in yourself using internal physiological cues, cognitive cues, and behavior. So you can create a list of your physiological, cognitive, and behavioral cues that indicate an increase in your emotional arousal. The degree of expression can be measured using an emotional thermometer. One of the aspects of affective education is to learn how to perceive your early warning signals that indicate emotional arousal that may need cognitive control. Now, when a particular emotion and the levels of expression are understood, the next component of affective education is to use the same procedures for a contrasting emotion. For example, after exploring happiness, the next topic explored would be sadness, or feeling relaxed would be explored before a project on feeling anxious, and so on. So in this way, you are learning to understand that certain thoughts or emotions are antidotes to other feelings. For example, some activities associated with feeling happy may be used to counteract feeling sad. So in a nutshell, through the use of affective education, you can begin the process of developing emotional intelligence. And in an ideal world, you would develop the following skills in the end: taking responsibility for your own emotions and happiness, showing respect by respecting other people's feelings, paying attention to nonverbal communication. For example, you would want to watch faces, listen to tone of voice, take note of body language, and so on. Looking for the humor or life lesson in a negative situation, listening twice as much as you speak, learning to relax when your emotions are running high, getting up and moving when you're feeling down, examining your feelings rather than the actions or motives of others, developing constructive coping skills for specific moods, being honest with yourself, avoiding people who don't respect your feelings, and lastly, acknowledging your negative feelings, looking for their source, and coming up with a way to solve the underlying problem.
If you would like to dig deeper into this business of affective education and developing some emotional intelligence, then there's a link below this video. We have an ongoing men's group. It's a men's only group for those on the autism spectrum, and it will be especially helpful for those who are trying to mend fences with their neurotypical partners, who blame them for being out of touch with their feelings, being insensitive, uncaring, and so on. You've heard it before, right? Click on the link below, guys, and register. I hope to see you in the next group. Okay, well, with respect to meltdowns, sometimes they're shutdowns, sometimes they're adult temper tantrums, it would be good to think in terms of prevention rather than intervention, because most of the time, and I'm speaking in generalities here, we'll use the example of the man with ASD, when he's already in the throes of something that, and by the way, it's always anxiety based. It would be good to think in terms of prevention, because once the individual with ASD is already triggered, you're just going to have to write it out at that point, because it's all anxiety based. Whenever gets angry, you can be assured that what you're seeing is the anger, but what's underneath the anger is anxiety. And the anger is nothing more than an anxiety reduction technique. And so when gets angry, he's already been triggered, and it's going to be really hard to put that bullet back in the gun at that point. And I'm not saying that intervention is never a usable strategy, but it's certainly the hard route to go, and it's going to be highly ineffective a lot of the time. So the best thing to do is think in terms of prevention. And so what he could begin to do, if he would be willing, would be to start a trigger journal. And I don't think it would be a 100-page journal, because I find that most of the time whoever he is, there's usually a finite set of triggers, and there's a huge crossover. So you might think, well, he gets triggered by this, and this. But if you look a little deeper, you realize that a lot of those things are the same thing. And so he probably only has 3 to 5 triggers. I'm going to make up some examples, simple examples that you can wrap your brain around. Maybe a hectic, chaotic, noisy environment would be one. Maybe being hit by surprises by his NT wife, who charges in there and says, oh, well, we need to do this now. When he's over here doing his own thing, minding his own business, and then she charges in there, now he's supposed to stop what he's doing and tend to whatever she wants. So unwanted interruption might be another example of a trigger. Coming home from a hard day at work, and you're beat, and he just wants to go somewhere by himself and de-escalate a little bit and kind of charge his battery, because social situations drain his battery. And so if he comes home from a difficult day at work, his battery's dead and he may need some time alone just to recharge a little bit before he tries to get involved with the family in conversation or whatever. Those are just 3 easy examples. And so the first thing you'd want to do is come up with a trigger journal. And then part of that journal then would be some alternative choices. So instead of, trigger 1 is this. And what I usually do when I get triggered that way is I yell at my wife. First of all, you'd want to identify when the trigger happens, because then you'd have a propensity to get angry. So you would want to come up with something. Okay, maybe instead of yelling at my wife, I could simply tell her, I've been triggered. This thing really upset me, and I'm just letting you know I'm kind of effed up right now, and I need you to be a little patient with me because I'm having a hard time watching my tongue. But in an ideal world, you would anticipate the trigger. You would know, okay, we're going to go do this thing now, and sometimes that triggers me, and so I'm going to be on alert walking into this situation knowing that I'm at risk of being triggered. So the trigger journal is most effective in that you can anticipate things that might be said or done that would trigger you, and if possible, avoid it altogether. You want to write down the triggers, and then you would want to look for themes amongst those triggers. So, for example, if he had 10 things in his journal that were triggers, it wouldn't take much of an investigator to realize, okay, well, these 3 are similar, and those 4 are similar, and these 2 are similar. So even though they would be separate incidents, if you looked a little deeper, you would realize it was only maybe 3 triggers.
So in working with adults on the autism spectrum, sometimes we get into this business of attribution retraining, and that's a fancy term for basically helping individuals who have mind blindness, alexithymia, and other traits of the disorder such as executive function deficits and so on, helps these individuals to check the evidence before reacting. Because if you are a spouse of someone on the autism spectrum, you may have been in a situation where you've said something that in your mind was totally 100% neutral and harmless, but it downloaded in his mind as criticism, or that you're being controlling or something along those lines. So one common effect of misinterpretation for people on the autism spectrum is the development of distrust in others. And honestly, in some cases, it's even what I would refer to as a mild form of paranoia. And this is largely due to impaired theory of mind skills in the cognitive profile of these individuals on the autism spectrum. Now, a theory of mind is the ability that we all have in order to make sense of the world we live in. Every person's thoughts, knowledge, beliefs, desires, and so on make up his or her own unique theory of mind. Now, people on the autism spectrum have difficulty conceptualizing and appreciating the thoughts and feelings of others. And this is called mind blindness. And it's this mind blindness thing that makes it difficult for these individuals to be able to relate to and understand the behaviors of you, the NT spouse, and others as well, co-workers, other family members, and so on. By failing to account for others' perspectives, individuals on the autism spectrum tend to misinterpret their messages. And for the NT spouses listening to this video, you've lived it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mind blindness also means that the individual with ASD level 1 has difficulty in distinguishing whether someone's actions are intentional or accidental. Okay? So neurotypical people will know from the context, body language, facial cues, and character of the other person involved that the intent was not to cause distress, injury, criticism, but people on the autism spectrum often focus primarily on the act and the consequences. For example, he bumped into me and it hurt, and so it was intentional. Whereas neurotypical people would consider the circumstances. For example, he was running, he tripped, he accidentally fell into me. So the neurotypical is able to fill in the blank with something that makes a little more sense than conclusion jumping.
With individuals on the high end of autism, there may need to be training in this business of checking the evidence before overreacting to the event or the person in question. And this training is called attribution training. The mind-blind individual often blames others exclusively and tends not to consider his own contribution, or he can excessively blame himself for the events. So it could be attributed on either extreme. Now, one aspect of ASD is a tendency for some of these individuals to adopt an attitude of arrogance, where the perceived focus of control is always external. So when the ASD individual believes that he was a victim of some form of injustice, the perpetrator, in this case would be the NT spouse, may be held responsible and become the target for punishment or chastisement or a long lecture, or be on the receiving end of a shutdown or meltdown. So people on the autism spectrum have considerable difficulty accepting that they themselves have contributed to an event. But again, the opposite can occur, where he has extremely low self-esteem and feels personally responsible for too many things, which results in feelings of anxiety and guilt. So in other words, he's either taking on too much responsibility for the issue, or he's deflecting and not taking any responsibility for the issue in question. So attribution training involves establishing the reality of the situation, the various participants' contributions to an incident, and determining how the individual on the autism spectrum can change his or her perception and response. A part of social skills training for this individual will revolve around how he attributes his success, and will likely require some attribution retraining to take place. So this is where the therapist, for example, retrains the individual to think about his success as something he actively influences, not something of which he is a victim. Now, there are 4 main factors to which we can attribute success or failure, and those are effort, ability, luck, and task difficulty. So we'll look at each of these in turn. A person attributing effort may say something along the lines of, I worked hard and that's why I did so good, or I was lazy and that's why I didn't accomplish my goal. So here I am attributing effort to the outcome. A person attributing ability may say something along the lines of, I'm so stupid, that's why I failed, or I'm so intelligent and that's why I succeeded. So here I would be attributing the outcome to my ability. A person attributing luck may say something along the lines of, I was wearing my lucky shirt today and so that's why I won the game, or I wasn't wearing my lucky shirt today and that's why I lost the game. So here I'm attributing luck to the outcome. And lastly, there's task difficulty. So if I'm attributing task difficulty, I might say something along the lines of, the test was so easy, that's why I passed, or the test was really super hard and that's why I failed. So there I'm attributing task difficulty to the outcome. You know, people don't have any control over luck or task difficulty, and ability is gained through gaining knowledge and skills. So therefore, the only aspect that people can directly influence on a regular basis is their effort. And this is where attribution training takes place. So the individual on the autism spectrum who adopts an effort-based belief gains an internal locus of control, which means he believes he is in control of circumstances, and he subsequently feels empowered. Now this is where the individual comes to believe that he has enough ability that with effort he can be successful, and that is attribution training. Cognitive restructuring enables people on the autism spectrum to correct distorted conceptualizations and dysfunctional beliefs. The process involves challenging their current thinking with logical evidence and ensuring the rationalization and cognitive control of their emotions.
Now, the first stage of cognitive restructuring is to establish the evidence for a particular belief. People on the autism spectrum often make false assumptions of their circumstances and the intentions of others, and they have a tendency to make a literal interpretation, and a casual comment may be taken out of context or may be taken to the extreme. All people are vulnerable to distorted conceptualizations, but people on the autism spectrum are less able to put things in perspective, to seek clarification, and to consider alternative explanations or responses. So neurotypical spouses can encourage their autistic spouse to be more flexible in their thinking and to seek clarification using questions or comments such as, "Are you joking?" or "I'm confused about what you just said." Such comments also can be used when misinterpreting someone's intentions, such as, "Did you do that deliberately?" And to rescue the situation after they've made an inappropriate response with a comment such as, "I'm sorry I offended you," or, "Oh, what should I have done instead?" One common effective misinterpretation is the development of paranoia. The person on the autism spectrum can have difficulty distinguishing between accidental or deliberate intent. Now, neurotypical people will know from the context, body language, and character of the other person involved that the intent was not to cause distress or injury. However, people on the spectrum can focus primarily on the act and the consequence. So people on the spectrum may need to be trained in checking the evidence before responding and developing more accurate mind-reading skills. Cognitive restructuring also includes a process known as attribution retraining. The person on the spectrum may blame others exclusively and not consider his own contribution, or he can excessively blame himself for events. One aspect of ASD is a tendency for some people to adopt an attitude of arrogance or omnipotence where the perceived focus of control is external. For example, the person may have the thought, "I have no control." Rather, outside circumstances control me. Specific individuals are held responsible and become the target for retribution or punishment. And these individuals have considerable difficulty accepting that they themselves have contributed to the event. The opposite can occur when the person on the spectrum has extremely low self-esteem and feels personally responsible, which results in feelings of anxiety and guilt. Attribution retraining involves establishing the reality of the situation, the various participants' contributions to an incident, and determining how the individual can change his perception and response. Today I want to talk to you guys about re-injuring the relationship. So, back in the day when you first got together, there was appreciation for one another, wasn't there? There was some love, compassion, and even gratitude, right? All of that is still there, but it's laying dormant because you are continuing to re-injure the relationship, if not a day-by-day basis, certainly a week-by-week basis. Think of it like this. If you were to stub your toe this morning, it would be swollen, black and blue. You may have even fractured your toe a little bit, but if you wrap it, if you nurture it, if you walk softly, it will heal itself, right? But if you re-injured it again tomorrow, and then again the day after, it would never heal. In fact, it would progressively get worse because you're injuring it faster than it can heal. So with the relationship, the re-injury occurs when you replay past hurts. So when you review the past injuries, things that were said and done that were hurtful, that's the content memory. You also replay the emotional memory. In other words, you feel bad all over again, just like you did when the actual event happened. This now influences how you speak to one another and how you behave to one another today. Reviewing those past hurts chronically, in some cases, feeling the pain all over again, contaminates how you speak to one another and behave toward one another today. That's re-injury. You're not talking to one another today like you did 5-10 years ago, for example. Everything is influenced from past hurts. So if you were to stop re-injuring the relationship, the sense of well-being and appreciation that was there in the beginning will come back, just like a cork that you pushed down into the water, and you finally let go of that cork, and it will float right back to the top again. So when you stop re-injuring the relationship, you will get back to a semblance of how it was in the beginning, where there was appreciation, there was love, there was compassion, there was gratitude. And again, how do you stop re-injuring? You stop chronically reviewing your past hurts, which means now you're chronically feeling the pain all over again, which means now the way you talk to one another and behave towards one another is contaminated by the past. That's the re-injury that we want to eliminate. You've got to learn how to deal with the past. Stay out of the past. There's nothing you can do about the past. It's over. How do you stay out of the past? By staying aware of your thoughts. Sit back and watch your thoughts. Listen to yourself talk. What is going on with your inner dialogue? What are you ruminating about? What are you anxietizing about? What are you catastrophizing about? Are you trashing yourself in your thoughts? Are you trashing other people in your thoughts? Listen to those conversations in your head, because they can be very dangerous. When you catch yourself going negative, thinking about the past, talking about the past, ruminating about the past, complaining about the past, change the topic. Change the topic and come back into the present moment. Get out of the past. We can't do anything about it. The past is a freaking trap. Keeps you in a state of anxiety and sometimes full-blown insanity. Living in the past will eat you up. It will make you a very negative and cynical person. It will allow you to be critical of yourself and critical of others. You can't do it better in the past. We wish we could. Believe me, all of us wish we could, but we can't, because the past doesn't exist anymore. And none of us have a time tunnel where we can crawl back into the past. Stay in the present moment as much as you can. And I promise you, you will feel better. You'll be happier. Your relationships will be greatly improved. Stay in the present moment.
Always throwing the past in my face. There's two past things. Stuff that you can't change at this point, and past stuff that presently you could do something about. So if she's going to throw the past in your face and there's no way to go back and rectify anything on that particular topic, you're just going to have to be okay with her being pissed off. You can't climb in your time tunnel and go back and fix it. Now, if it's a past incident that you can currently do something about, then you use the line that we just said. Okay, well, I can't go back and erase that, but is there anything I can do about that today? With the first one, where you can't go back and fix it, let her be the one stuck in the past. You're just going to have to be okay with her being stuck back there. The past issue that you can do something about, just ask. Okay, well, I can't go back and erase that from our history, but is there something that I can do now, today? If the answer is yes, then now you have the choice to do something about it or not.
There's never a great reason to bring up the past, unless, of course, it's to reflect on a positive memory, something that the two of you did together that was pleasant. Short of that, however, bringing up the past basically poisons the present moment. Think of a moment in time. It's less than a second in length, right? So this video is only a few seconds old at this point. There's been dozens of moments within this time frame already. So the moment is less than a second in length. But when you bring up the past, look at the lengthy history of the past. It could be 5, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. So when you bring up the past, you're dragging a very lengthy recollection of pain into the current moment. When you bring up the past, you experience content memory, which is the hurtful things that were said and done. You also experience emotional memory. In other words, how you felt during the incident in question. So when you bring up the past, which is years old at this point, you're overloading the present moment, toxifying it. Think of it like this. You're eating a bowl of soup with the appropriate amount of sodium, but you decide you're going to take the whole salt shaker and dump the whole thing in there. Now you've contaminated it. There's no way you could eat it. It would make you sick if you did. So when you bring up the past, you're dragging in decades of hurt into the present moment. And where does that get you? What have you actually achieved doing that? In most cases, you have just created yet another painful memory. So when you bring up the hurtful things of the past, you're going to remember what was said and done. You're going to remember how you felt. It's going to instantly open up old wounds, and you have toxified or overloaded the current moment. You have dumped years of misery into a few seconds. Never any great reason to bring up the past. So this is a message to the neurotypical wives out there. Your autistic husband, let's say, for example, says something or does something that's hurtful. Okay, that's step number one. And let's say that in this scenario that I'm painting, step number two is you want to talk to him about how that hurts your feelings. We'll call that step number two. And you try to reason with him or emotionalize with him so that he will understand that his behavior resulted in pain for you. So basically you're trying to instill some appropriate, healthy guilt in him. That's the whole point of you saying, hey, what you said or did there was hurtful, and you want to talk about your feelings. And your motivation for that is you want to instill some healthy guilt in him. You want that to stimulate some emotion in him, in this case, the emotion of guilt. Why would you want to do that? Well, your primary motivation isn't to guilt trip him in the form of revenge. Your primary motivation is if he feels a healthy sense of guilt about what he has said or done that resulted in my pain, he will change his behavior, right? So that's the last step in the progression here. Unfortunately, you're talking to somebody who's out of touch with his emotions and your emotions. It's called alexithymia. So your method fails, and has failed how many times now? Hundreds? So here's the progression again. He says or does something that's hurtful. You try to articulate to him that it was hurtful. You're appealing to his emotions, in this case, healthy guilt, in hopes that he will change behavior, but your message gets lost. You would get it if you had a female friend that you unintentionally did something or said something that was hurtful to her, and she would talk to you about how that felt. You would instantly feel a sense of guilt, and you would want to change your behavior accordingly. So it's not that your husband doesn't want to change his behavior. It's that he doesn't get the connection between the healthy guilt and the behavioral change. There is no healthy guilt trigger to motivate him to change behavior. And you download that as he doesn't give a shit. No, he does. It's that he doesn't feel that healthy sense of guilt about behavior, so therefore there's no motivation to change behavior. That's why I preach it's best to speak in terms of needs rather than feelings. Hey guys, this is Mark, and I got an interesting question. It was a very simple question, but it was somewhat profound. The question in essence was, what is the main problem in the case where the autistic husband just simply cannot connect with his wife? That seems like a very just general question, right? And I thought, gosh, he was wanting to know the number one problem. And I had to think for a minute because there's so many issues, right? We have the mind blindness, we have alexithymia, we have executive function deficits, we have anxiety, we have sensory sensitivities. And she would complain that she doesn't get emotional reciprocity, give and take in conversation, affection, sex, understanding, and so on. So the list is long and deep of the problems, but if I had to come up with the number one thing, and that's the whole point of this video, what's the number one thing to be thinking about? And by the way, this video is for the autistic husbands out there. If you're wanting to know what should I pay attention to most, not that there's just one thing, but what's paramount? What's at the top of the list? Let's say a top 10 list. What's number one spot? It would be this. You're not being present in the moment with her. You're distracted. Your mind is elsewhere. And sometimes you're off in fantasy land while she's talking to you. And so when you are distracted and your mind is elsewhere, maybe she's talking to you and you're even looking at your phone, that's disconnection. And even if you are faking a connection, you're pretending that you're listening and being attentive, she's going to know that, no, he's really not being attentive. Probably the most insulting thing any of us can do is to silently, chronically ignore people that are trying to connect. And your wife is your NT wife has probably tried to connect with you in conversation and convey feelings and opinions and perspectives and wants and needs. And you're there physically, but mentally you're gone, aren't you? In most cases, you're not mentally available or emotionally available. So that's what would be at the top of the list. When your NT wife is trying to connect with you, you're elsewhere, mentally and emotionally. So we have three things, right? You can connect physically, you can connect mentally, you can connect emotionally, and you're only achieving 33% of the equation. You just happen to be in the same room with her. Not cutting it, guys. It's not cutting it. You need to not only be in the same room with her, you need to be next to her. You need to be paying attention. Put your digital device away, look in her direction, listen attentively, and connect with her I'm going to go ahead and say it, hyper-focus on what she's saying. You're good at hyper-focusing on your special interests. So why don't you muster up some discipline? This is possible, to muster up some discipline and willpower and begin to practice hyper-focusing on my wife when she's telling me something that she views that is important to her. So, moral to the story, guys. Probably at the top of the list of the problems that you're having as an autistic husband is when she's trying to connect, you're not present. You're mentally and emotionally unavailable. And it's possible to turn that around. You'll have to practice. And then it'll become the new habit. The old habit was, yeah, she's over here talking somewhere, and I'm kind of looking at her, and I'm somewhat hearing it, but my mind is elsewhere. That's the old habit. The new habit is, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to look in her direction. I'm going to hyper-focus on what she is saying, and I'm going to do my damnedest to understand her perspective. So that's your assignment, guys. Do it. All right, 15 ways that you can make false assumptions about your spouse's behavior. Number 1, reading into their silence, assuming that they're upset or annoyed just because they're quiet without checking in with them. Number 2, interpreting body language incorrectly, misreading their posture or facial expressions as indifference or anger, even when they're simply tired or deep in thought. Number 3, generalizing past behavior, concluding that they react the same way in a new situation based on how they handled a similar one in the past. Number 4, assuming their opinion, taking it for granted that they share the same views and preferences without actually asking them. Number 5, projecting your feelings. This is assuming they feel the same way you do about a situation, leading you to misunderstand their reactions. Number 6, making snap judgments, judging their actions in a moment without understanding the context or circumstances surrounding it. Number 7, overlooking nonverbal cues, ignoring other signs of their feelings or thoughts, such as changes in routine that may indicate they're dealing with stress. Number 8, misinterpretation of social interactions, assuming that they are uninterested in family or friends based on them wanting time alone without realizing they may just need to recharge. Number 9, assuming forgetfulness equals lack of care, thinking they forgot to do something because they don't care, instead of recognizing it could be due to stress or distraction or maybe a working memory deficit. And number 10, reading messages too deeply. This is overanalyzing a simple text or message and concluding that it signifies deeper problems in your relationship. Number 11, attributing intentions incorrectly, believing they did something to hurt you or provoke a reaction when it might have been unintentional. Number 12, rushing to conclusions. This is assuming they are avoiding you because of something you did when they might just be preoccupied with other issues. Number 13, making assumptions based on stereotypes. This is generalizing their behavior based on stereotypes related to gender or personal background rather than understanding them as an individual. Number 14, assuming their needs are different, This is concluding what they need in terms of support or affection without discussing it openly. And number 15, taking their actions personally, believing their choices and actions are a reflection of their feelings for you rather than considering other influences they may be handling. So these assumptions will lead to misunderstandings and conflict. Good luck. Quick message to guys on the autism spectrum. You've heard of fighting for things that are important to you, right? Your wife is fighting because you're important to her, but you're missing the second part. You just view it as fighting. Just a quick message to the NT spouses out there. Autism was here long before you were born, and autism is going to be here long after you're gone. It has nothing to do with you. There's no need to take it personally. It's a lot like the weather. There's going to be lightning, thunderstorms, sun, rain. It's a mixed bag. To the NT wives out there, if you've tried to get through to your husband by appealing to his emotions and his empathy and talking about your feelings, as you have found out, you don't get anywhere because he doesn't speak emotionese. If you want to get through to him, you're going to have to think like he thinks rather than insisting that he feels like you feel. And how you're going to get through to him is appeal to his logic. So stop with the speaking emotionese, just making that term up. It doesn't exist. Instead, start speaking logicies. So, message to NT spouses out there, what do you have in the way of self-care strategies in all different domains of life? Spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, financially, even vocationally and educationally. What are some of your self-care strategies? Does changing your autistic spouse fall into the category of one of your self-care strategies? It shouldn't, because that's a self-sabotage strategy, not a self-care strategy. Your autistic husband has self-care strategies. He will engage in his special interests for lengthy periods of time to de-escalate, to reduce his anxiety, to charge his battery. You need to find a self-care strategy that's as good as his. And changing him can't be one of your self-care strategies. That's self-sabotage. So again, all domains of life, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, financially, what can you do self-care-wise? Dear NTYs, autism spectrum disorder is what it is. You can't change it. Trying to change the traits in an autistic person is like trying to change the weather. You don't stand a chance getting that accomplished. Please stop beating your head against a brick wall. He has to understand my feelings or I'm being abused. He has to say or do certain things, otherwise I'm not okay inside. He has to avoid saying or doing certain things, otherwise it hurts my feelings. Why would you want to give anybody that kind of power? Hey, a quick message to the NT wives out there. You want to speak your autistic husband's love language? It's not going to be words of affirmation or acts of service or gifts or quality time or physical touch. Just stop pointing out what he's doing wrong. That's his love language. He would view that as a very loving thing to do. Quick message to the NT wives out there. Did you ever consider the concept that less is better? In other words, the harder you try, the more you push him away, and the more you back off, the more you pull him in. I would give it a shot. What you've been doing may not be working. Quick message to the NT spouses out there. Imagine sitting down, being forced to sit down at a poker table and play poker, and you have no freaking idea how to play poker. Okay, everybody else does. You're the only one that doesn't know. But you got to play the game. You got to try to figure it out fast. That's how your autistic spouse feels in social and emotional situations that are over his head. Quick message to NT spouses. Think of your autistic husband as a battery, and he will only be able to engage in social activities that are laden with emotional intricacies for so long before his battery is dead. And how does he recharge his battery? He goes and engages in his special interest. So, do you not realize that your autistic spouse would be exhibiting those same autistic traits even if you weren't around? So why would you want to make it about you? Okay? You say, well, he doesn't care about my feelings. No, he doesn't see your feelings. It's not years that are aging you. It's your reaction, or I could say your toxic overreaction to your spouse's behavior that's aging you. So You can relax into some acceptance about some things, or you can ruminate into resentment about most things. But if you choose the latter, you have by default chosen rapid aging. Okay, so if your spouse does or says something that you download as being disrespectful, it hurts. We'll call it hurtful. But when you replay the event, now you're hurting you. Okay, so when you replay the original thing that happened once, but you've replayed it 15 times, it feels like it's happened 15 times, and then you blame your spouse for doing it to you for 15 times when it was only once. So yeah, we'll call the original event hurtful. Shouldn't have happened, it was wrong. But your replays, it's not the other person doing it to you then, now you're doing it to yourself. This is going to sound sarcastic. It's not meant to be. I'm actually telling you the truth. How does an ASD spouse show his love for his NT wife? He does things for her. How does the NT wife show her love for her autistic husband? She tries to fix him because she cares about the relationship. So he can fix the dishwasher, and for example, and that's how he shows his love. And she shows her love by saying, yeah, okay, well, thanks for fixing the dishwasher, and I'm going to continue to try to fix you because I care about you. The problem is he can always fix the dishwasher. You can never fix him. So I get this comment from NT wives a lot, and they say, well, my husband doesn't recognize he has anxiety. He says he doesn't have anxiety. Well, if he has ASD level 1, how is he going to know if he has anxiety? Because he's going to have some version of alexithymia, which means he's out of touch with his emotions. And if you've been anxious your entire life, how would you know whether you're anxious or not? It's like growing up in a dark room and you've lived in there for 40 years, and then somebody comes along and says, wow, your room is very dark. And you go, no, it's not dark. It's always been this way. This is familiar. This is how it's always been. Therefore, it must be normal. So he's not going to know whether he has anxiety or not. The more you talk about the past, the more you preserve the past. The more you bring up the past, the more you relive the past. The more you think about, focus on, and feel the emotional pain of the past, the more you bring the past into the present moment. It's a very destructive cycle. I'm letting you off the hook for being responsible for my feelings. And I'm letting you off the hook for being responsible for my self-esteem. And I'm letting you off the hook for being responsible for how I download your behavior. What's the number one cause of marital anxiety, stress, depression, misery in a neurodiverse marriage? Unrealistic expectations. What does the autistic spouse want more than anything? To be given a word of appreciation from his NT spouse every once in a while to confirm that he's doing something right. What does the NT spouse want more than anything? For her autistic spouse to just spend time with her, not necessarily do anything for her per se. Just a quick message to both parties in the neurodiverse relationship. When the two of you are having a disagreement and you're trying to explain your side of things and you're trying to help the other person to get your perspective, that is the dumbest thing you'll ever do. Because the more you explain, the more you try to reason with and get the other person to get it, the more the other person is going to download your delivery as just more defensiveness and more trying to prove that they're wrong. So the next time you're trying to get the other person to get it and they're not getting it, instead of further explanations, find a washcloth and stick it in your mouth. Message to both the NT spouses and the ASD spouses. It's not what your spouse is doing to you. It's your download of what your spouse is doing to you. And then your reaction based on your download. Trying to change the other person so that you'll feel better doesn't work. You have evidence of that. In fact, trying to change the other person makes a bad problem worse, because when they don't change, you assume that they don't want you to feel better. Quick message to the NT spouses out there. Why would you shame your autistic husband and guilt trip your autistic husband and then expect him not to explode in some version of a meltdown? That's like saying, I want to play with dynamite, but I don't want it to explode. No, if you're going to shame, throw, and guilt trip, you're going to be on the receiving end of some kind of meltdown or shutdown or an adult temper tantrum, and that's just going to come with the territory. And by the way, your shaming and guilting is not going to change behavior. It's going to increase that behavior. You got to find another method. So if you are a neurotypical wife married to someone who is autistic, you are highly social and emotional, and your autistic spouse is not. And if you insist that he becomes social and emotional, unfortunately, you're going to push him away, and then his tendency will very likely be to be less social and even less emotionally connecting. So insisting in this case will definitely work against you. Have you discovered that the more things you complain about, the more things to complain about show up? Have you discovered that the more insecure you are, the more you require the other person to change their behavior so you'll be okay inside? Have you discovered that the more you look around and hunt down the things that are going wrong, more wrong things tend to show up? So the ASD husband wants to shut down to reduce his anxiety. The NT wife wants to talk through the problems to reduce her anxiety. That's a hell of a dilemma, isn't it? Guess who's the biggest loser in that scenario? She is. That's Tobias. You can make a point or you can keep the peace, but you can't do both, not at the same time. You might think, well, we should be able to make a point and keep the peace at the same time. Hasn't worked that way for the last 10 years. What makes you think it's going to work that way later this afternoon? You can do one or the other. You can't do both. I'm not suggesting which one to do. You decide what's best for you in the moment. But if you make a point, you're sacrificing the peace. And if you opt to keep the peace, you may very well be sacrificing an opportunity to make a point. You pick your choice. But if you decide to make a point, don't bitch about the fact that there's no peace. Doesn't work like that. Sorry. I run into this a lot where a person in the neurodiverse marriage says, I'm going to leave this miserable marriage because I want to leave my problems behind. And so they get into the next relationship and find that they didn't leave their problems behind. They just brought those problems into the next relationship. When you try to control or change your spouse, resentment and resistance will be soon to follow. Hey, a quick message to the spouses out there on the autism spectrum. I'm specifically referring to the husbands in this case. If we were to break things down to its most common element with respect to your NT wife's needs, she needs to feel safe. I mean, she has many needs, but that would be primary. In most cases, that would be at the top. So what can you do today to help your NT wife feel safe? Some lessons arrive disguised as repetition. You know that feeling when life seems to circle back, the same conflict, the same kind of heartbreak, the same challenge wearing a slightly different face. But think of it like this, repetition isn't failure. It's the universe's way of saying, well, you missed it the last time, so we get to try it again. So life repeats its lessons, not to punish us, but to invite us to see what's still unfinished. Every familiar struggle is an echo of something deeper asking to be healed. The universe is very patient. It keeps rephrasing truth until we learn the language of surrender. It doesn't rush us. It doesn't shame us. It just keeps showing up again and again until our hearts are ready to listen. You see, truth is not a one-time download. It's a slow transition from mind to soul. So when we resist, life repeats. When we surrender, life reveals. That's the grace of it. We don't get it wrong. we just get another chance to hear the same wisdom more deeply. Now, surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in, specifically giving in to awareness, to humility, and to truth. I'm willing to stop fighting the lesson and start learning from it would be a great mantra to adopt. When we surrender, we shift from asking, why is this happening to me? To asking, what is this trying to teach me? And suddenly what looked like punishment feels like guidance. Every return is an invitation not to start over, but to start deeper. Growth is not a straight line, it's a spiral. We circle back, but from a higher place each time. We revisit the same wound, but we bring more wisdom to it. You're not failing the test, okay? You're actually mastering the lesson. You're meeting the same truth, but with stronger hands and a softer heart. So when life brings you back to familiar ground, don't rush to escape it. Don't rush to fight against it. What is this moment showing me now that I couldn't see before would be a good question to ask. Because repetition isn't a sign that you're stuck. It's a sign that your soul is serious about growth. You don't start over each time. You start deeper. And that's how wisdom is born. And that's when relationships get healed.
Hey guys, this is Mark, and I've got a message to the people on the autism spectrum, specifically the spouses. And I want to be a little critical here, but I have your best interest at heart, and so that's why I'm mentioning this. Your downloads are severely compromised. When we'll use the example of the ASD husband and the NT wife. We'll pick a worst case scenario too. Let's say that she is upset, wants to address the issue now, doesn't want to wait, and she's animated, and I'm going to be a little sarcastic here with her, and she drones on for too long, and she talks about 4 or 5 problems, and she's upset, and she's talking about feelings, and she's bringing up the past and all of these things. Your reception is a lot like, let's pretend you're on a mountain in Alaska and you're trying to tune into an AM station in San Diego. You can barely hear anything. You're picking up on about every 10th word. That's how your brain operates in those moments. When she is upset, you are anxious, and you're only able to listen to maybe 80% of what she says, and you're only going to understand 60% of that, and you're only going to retain 40% of that. And if she's asking you to do something, you're probably only going to follow through with maybe 10% of that, if at all. And so the message to this video is, you have to be careful in these risky conversations, because you're picking up on so little data that she is going to assume that because you're not picking up on it, it's because you're not listening and you don't care. So to the guys with ASD, the husbands, it would be good for you to ask your wife when she's upset if it would be possible to wait until she's calm before she mentions it. If she would just bring up one topic instead of multiple topics. If you could keep the conversation fairly short. If she could not bring up the past, unless it's something you can fix, or if it's a past issue that's also a current issue. And not talk about feelings, instead just talk about needs. Ask her if she would do those things, because if she doesn't, she's might as well just speak Chinese to you. So your downloads are severely compromised anyway, even in some best case scenarios. If you have ASD level 1, you're going to have some element of mind blindness, some element of alexithymia, which is emotions blindness. You're going to have some executive function deficits. You're not going to have all of them, but you're going to have more than one. And you're certainly going to have anxiety. All of that stuff messes with your reception severely. And so your downloads are only about 20% complete. If you were to, let's say for example, go on iTunes and download a song, that song would download 100% accurately. It would download on your computer exactly as it was designed. But when your wife is talking to you, especially about a relationship problem and she's upset, your download is going to be about 90% off. And then the two of you operate after that conversation or that argument, the two of you operate based on your limited amount of information that you downloaded. You're only operating on 10% of information that she delivered. It's not enough. It's not going to work. And then she's going to run the risk of assuming that you just don't listen and don't care and don't want to understand, which that's not what's going on. So again, your downloads are severely compromised, especially in worst case scenarios. So ask her if she would give you a heads up that she needs to talk. Only talk to you when she's calm or nearly calm. Stick to one problem at a time. Be very concrete and specific in her delivery. Try to keep it short. Try to talk about needs and facts rather than feelings. Don't bring up the past unless it's something you can fix or it's still relevant to the present. You will need to ask her to do these things. Otherwise, your reception is going to be so far off, nothing gets resolved. And it's worse than that. Not only will things not get resolved, it'll make a bad problem worse.
Hey, this is Mark Hutton. Would you like to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call? Okay, it's so simple. Just look under any of my videos in the description area. Click on this Calendar link. Now you see my calendar. Pick your month, your day, any time that's available. Enter your name and email address. Then you'll get a follow-up email with the Zoom link on the day and time that you picked. And voila, we will talk.